At the moment, we have all been waiting for different perspectives on this round table. Just what exactly was that? These are questions a number of Kenyans will be asking themselves. We are seeing a new breed of protesters. I think that also caught the attention of many Kenyans and the power of social media. Now, who thought they would come behind the social media masks to the ground? Occupy Parliament has taken every home state now by surprise. I want to hear from our guests here in studio this moment, and I want to appreciate Agnes Gitau, who is a tax manager at Ronald's Africa, tax management. We have the debt, we have a country to run. The president was very vocal recently saying we have to pay taxes to manage this country. With your opening remarks, are we making a very huge blunder today as a country? Welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you so very much for having me. And this is quite a wonderful opportunity, especially considering the events of today. And especially because we had had such a chance before about the housing levy, where Kenyans went up and about wondering and trying to oppose the housing levy proposal, and yet it still passed. But we are looking at a moment where Kenyans went out to oppose the finance bill, and we see during this day at some point where the government, the Kenya Kwanza government, comes up and lays down a number of proposals whereby they are proposing to calm down or bring down by removing some of the taxes or levies that had already been proposed in the finance bill. And I think what I feel at the moment is like there is hope for Kenyans, and especially the younger generation is very much inspired, because it means that their actions have indeed power, and they are the people to change this nation.
They are the people to change this nation. Let me hear from William Ramogi, who is a finance and economic expert. Now, before we bring in the finance aspect here, you had some of these young people saying, we are the Raila. Now, we are the Orengos. They are singing in those cells, in the Land Cruisers, and they are just, do not have weapons. All right, but they're out there pushing for what they're saying, #reject the finance bill. How did this make you feel from where you sit?
No, I feel awesome.
Awesome? Is it?
Yes, I loved the day. First of all, it was amazing to just see the young people participate in the political process. We were a bit concerned about this Generation Z guys, because they are politically averse. They don't just vote because it's their duty to vote. They actually look carefully, and if they don't see something that convinces them, they don't vote. So we thought they would not participate in the political process of convincing the administration that the finance bill is not right for Kenyans. But they came out in numbers, and they did not disappoint. But I also want to pass a comment on this one for those of us involved in policy advocacy. It is evident that, one, if you want to do policy advocacy on the finance bill or the budget, don't focus on the president. Because ordinarily what MPs do is they go vote for the finance bill, and then they join you and I to make noise against the president in funerals and everywhere else. And even the opposition MPs vote for it indirectly by absenting themselves. But this year, I see Kenyans have focused their attention and their focus on parliament, and it has worked, because the parliamentarians were now afraid of voting for the thing. The second thing I have noticed is public participation does not work. It is just there by law, but in practice it does not work. The president
does not work only in this country, or it does not work in entirety globally?
It does not work in this country, because we tried last year. The committee went to Athi River, and they called all these opinion leaders and opinion shapers to give them ideas, and they sat there until midnight for a whole week. And then they go and they rubbish all that, and they execute what the orders they had received from State House. And so it was evident that public participation will not work in this case. And I think what the language that this administration and the government still listens to is the streets. And so they have confirmed our worries that they don't want public participation. They want street maandamano, kwanza organic one with Gen Z. That one works. Ile Raila doesn't.
Oh, interesting. Let me hear from Wakili here, the former LSK president. In fact, you know, LSK released a statement, and he's saying that the government only understands maandamano. I know Article, I think, 37 of the Constitution, but right to picket, peaceably, unarmed. What are your opening remarks today? And why did you release the statement? I mean, you're not really the president right now. Former LSK, you're in the LSK. Why was this statement very important? I know there are some arrests that were made, etc., but perhaps your opening remarks to the events of today.
I mean, generally speaking, the Law Society always will speak to what the law is, and whenever they deem that any action or utterances are against what the Constitution provides, then they will be able to speak out. And I think that it was in that spirit that the Law Society put out the statement that they did put out today morning. But for me, I would want to say that I was watching the day with a lot of keen interest. And keen interest in the sense that we understand the legislative making process. And we know that it begins with proposals in the form of the bill, and that then those proposals are subjected to public participation, and various people make their representations. And our focus was on two things. The response that the Finance Committee will give to the various representations that they received on the comments contained in the Finance Act, on one hand, and on the second hand, the agitation that has been made by members of the public in terms of, one, occupy Parliament, in terms of, two, reject the Finance Act, in terms of the plans to protest, peacefully protest, and for me, noting that the protests were largely driven by social media, I wanted to see just how effective this can be. And I was interested because when you look at our key political figures, all of them are on social media. They are on TikTok now, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, and so there is a realization that you cannot ignore the social media when it comes to the politicization in this country. And I want to see, and I wanted to see, one, how sustained and how successful that social media activism will be, and to also look at it and see whether it impacted in terms of the response that will come from the Finance Committee. But also, most importantly, I'm now trying to look into the future to try and see, is it something that is going to be sustainable? Because if it is going to be sustainable, then it means that there's going to be a radical change in the manner in which we politic. Because if the pressure is sustained for long, and knowing that politicians ultimately respond to one thing, which is self-survival, I have a feeling that if this pressure then is sustained, the aspect of self-survival of politicians may just compel them to change the manner in which this country politics. And this in itself may be a moment where we have revolutionized the manner in which we conduct our politics and the manner in which we conduct public participation.
Speaking of such very deep words, revolutionize. If you look back in history, there was, and I mean not to, disguise this as any sort of revolution, but if you followed closely the Arab Revolution, this were youthful people. Tahrir, if you followed through to Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, I think it's stuck around Syria, but this was not a good sight to see. When you're saying this could be it, let me just listen to a few Kenyans who were able to meet earlier on the ground, just to sample but a few voices, and we could come back to the magnitude of what was on the ground earlier today.
People, why are we seeing a town, a capital city that looks like a battle zone with armored vehicles and police and grenades? Why is it a budget for the people? If it is for the people would be on the street.
We are the new Raila. We are the new James Orengo. Yes, you used to say that demonstrations were called by Raila Odinga and the ODM team and those that are against the government. But do you see any ODM person here? There's nobody who is wearing their T-shirts, their brands. There's no Wiper here. There's no Jubilee here. We are Kenyans, ordinary Kenyans who are tired of this government.
Umeona hata wengi ni majenzis wamesema sisi hii kitu inatutishia sana. So acha sisi tuamke, tuingie streets to say no to the finance bill.
And we are warning the government, if this is going to go on, we'll be here every time. We reject everything.
I know Agnes is smiling, but, if you look at this, she's saying we'll be here all the time. We'll be here all the time. You see, Kenya Kwanza held a parliamentary group meeting very fast. Yes. All right, they were on it very fast. They came out and said, we heard you. We have heard you. I'll play some of those clips shortly. Yeah. Do you think they were cowed by the Kenyans? Do you think this pressure has worked for real? Are you also agreeing with William here that that is the only language they will get to hear, even though Finance Bill 2023 passed anyway, but we're seeing about 20 clauses now amended. Another question is there a mind game here? Like, play with Kenyans' minds, throw it up by 300%, reduce it by 20%, act like you've done something about it.
Okay, so first I'm smiling because I can see the younger generation is out on the street, meaning they have an idea of what is happening. Previously, you'd find there are elections going on, and many middle-aged and young generations are out there doing their own things, watching movies and everything. Nobody concerned with voting, who is getting into office and why, what laws are being passed for this country. And we are at a point whereby people are actually, the younger generation to be specific, are out in the streets saying, this government has come so hard on us. These taxes are being introduced day in, day out, and it's about time that we stand the ground. As a few people have said they're the new James Orengos, they're the new Raila Odingas. They'll not aid to be called out for maandamano to come out. They're out here standing their ground saying we do not want the finance bill. The question now begs is, if I were to ask these few young people, why don't you want the finance bill? Is it that they know exactly what is it that they are rejecting, or is it a wave in the social media?
At least they were clear on about 6 of, it was very clear on the eco levy. They spoke on the, the motto. They spoke on the bread. Even those in diaspora spoke of the bread. I think this was common knowledge across.
Yes, and as Eric pointed out here, he's looking forward to see where this leads. It's a good direction because people have an idea of what it starts with, having an idea. They know there was tax being levied on bread. That's a start. They know there was motor vehicle tax being proposed. They know there is an eco levy. That is like quite an improvement with the situation where we are coming from, where people are just bystanders or not concerned with matters, taxes being passed. Actually not, I have noticed many Kenyans are growing to even understand what is a finance bill. Some of them, it's the first time they are knowing how laws come into place here in Kenya. And I think it's a move towards the right direction because it means the eyes and the ears are on our leaders. And I am trusting that it won't stop here. The next time we go to vote, people will actually focus on, I remember there was a finance bill that introduced motor vehicle tax. It didn't sit well with me. So whom do I want to go into office to represent me and even follow up with the members of parliament that we elect? What have you voted in that helps me, that helps my constituency and all? Yeah.
Now, here's a real question. I know we're going this way and that way, but we just remember the other day, IMF congratulated us for this remarkable, move we made to expand our tax base. In fact, we really made a good picture there. But as we see now, we have conditions to these loans. If we do not pay taxes, the way Kenyans are saying, does it mean we're going back to the loans? Or how is this going to work? What are the implications of the amendments that we're seeing right now? And how is the government going to maneuver through this, William?
That's a very loaded question, but allow me just one permission to respond to something he mentioned.
Yes. On
survival. He mentioned the survival mode that is coming, and I just want to unpack it a little. He was very diplomatic. I'm sorry, I'm not in the diplomatic mood this evening. What this means is that honeymoon is over for the Kenya Kwanza administration. The reason why I say that is because in the first year or 2 years of your administration, you are still enjoying a lot of popularity after being elected democratically. And so you can afford to come up with unpopular decisions while you are riding on this popularity and the wave of that popularity. And then you squeeze it in a year or two as much as you can, because every administration has bad news. So now the fact that they are unable to implement their bad news means that popularity has just ended. And with the end of the popularity, then the honeymoon is over. And now we go into survival mode. Survival mode means that there will be a possible shift in the tightening of tightening policies, because we've seen fiscal tightening. Fiscal tightening is where you just increase taxes and you just see how far it can go. We've also seen monetary tightening in a case where we are just seeing the interest rates go up with the excuse that we are trying to manage the inflation rates, even though the inflation has come significantly lower, but we are still up there in terms of interest rates. And so that might shift to actually make sure that they get the validation from wananchi. But the other thing also that will shift is the support base. There will be a political reshuffle necessary to win the support of Mwananchi, because they have realized they've lost the support of Mwananchi. And that reshuffle could be either cabinet level or party level, or some of my friends are advising the president might take the axe and face the music, so that then they are the sacrificial lamb. Anyways, the point is, it is now different moving forward because we are on survival mode. Coming back to your question on the implications of this on the finance and economic policies of our country. One, I want to say that, yes, it will have a hole on the budget. And so what I expect in the coming weeks is they will have to go back to the budget and actually eliminate some of the things they feel are not a priority. If you asked me, there are infrastructure projects that can hold on, because you get a roads ministry getting over 100 billion at a time that there is basic infrastructure, but we are just coming to recarpet.
Would you say that at a time where the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is coming in, everybody wants their road done, everybody wants these resources? Yes. Don't you think that's going to come out again to bring another trouble?
That idea has to die a natural death, or it must be killed violently. Somehow, somewhere, there will be a review of the budget as it is right now.
Okay.
But it cannot fly the way it is, because we no longer have the 300 billion that we were hoping to get from this finance bill. It's no longer there. And so that means we will have to survive with what they got last year in terms of the housing levy, in terms of the VAT on fuel. That's all that they are going to work with. But there will also be a possible increase in revenue to GDP, what the president calls tax to GDP. I expect that with at least the thawing of the public towards the economic policies, then there will be more cooperation towards the tax policies that they have put in place. Because initially, that lack of cooperation made it difficult for them to collect. They came when it was 15.1, and by end of last year, it was 14%. So that means it dipped. So we expect that that will also adjust.
You know, I want to also just bring the viewer closer. I want to hear from Wakili here, because there are a number of things we're looking at. But when the PG happened, and this is what, you know, of course, the president was there as well. And these were the remarks that the Kenya Kwanza parliamentarians said to the Kenyans after the parliamentary group meeting. Let's just listen in to bring you closer to the events of today earlier on.
You will notice from the changes that will be proposed by the chair in the report that you tabled this afternoon, we are devoting more money back into people's pockets, especially the employed Kenyans who have been contributing to the housing levy. The housing levy has been proposed together with the Social Health Insurance Fund, the National Social Security Fund, and now the housing levy to be tax deductible. And that will ensure that what will be subjected to pay as you earn will be an amount less than what was there before, and therefore more disposable income. When the chair and the finance committee listened to stakeholders, especially the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, a very good case was made for protection of the local manufacturing industry. Therefore, to protect our local manufacturing industry and create jobs within our economy, we are therefore levying those levies on imported finished products, right from the borders, the motorcycles, to sanitary towels that are imported, and diapers and all that.
And I want to give you a bit of a flashback. I want to hear from Wakili here. The same gentleman speaking, who is now Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, was on, you know, a campaign mode, I think a few years back, saying they would not allow the Uhuru-led government to increase any taxes. Neither would they frustrate the border people. Listening to what he said, are you convinced? Just the speech, just the bit that we have shared, are you convinced money is going to go back to people's pockets this far?
You know, unfortunately, when you listen to politicians, there are two things that you listen to. There's the political rhetoric that they engage in, and then there is the sense, and there is the government policy.
All right.
I've had occasion when I was president of the Law Society to make various representations to the Finance Committee in terms of the budget, in terms of the previous finance bills that have been passed. And I can say that when you engage in that process, you get a sense that they can actually divorce the politics from the policy. And so therefore you are able to discuss with them policy issue, you are able to discuss with them constitutional issues, and you're able to discuss with them even what the courts have said on certain things that they have made proposals on. So that's the one aspect. But the other aspect is that when they now come out of that very formal setup where you're able to engage at a very intellectual level and share and discuss ideas, they come out and they take certain political positions. And so when you listen to Ichung'wah, at one time he will take political positions because they are politicians. That is not what we focus on. And I think for the professionals, and I probably want to say for all of us who are here, we would now be looking for the final copy, of the Finance Act to see.
Finance bill?
Also the finance bill, because once it is passed and signed into law by the president, once they make the adjustments and it becomes the act, we'll be looking at it to ask ourselves, we made the representations on this, have they been captured? On this, have they been captured? On this, have they been captured? All of us are now going through the report to try and see how did they deal with this, our views, how did they deal with this, how did they deal with that. And then those would be what the professionals would be concerned with. And in this instance, there might be people who would want to say, you know what, this guy is submitted to the public pressure that was there, and you know, they accepted everything that was there. But there will be other people who will actually look at it and say, no, we gave proposals on 1, 2, 3, and these ones were never considered. And there will be people who will be challenging some of those provisions in court. So there is that dichotomy that we need to understand, that sometimes our politicians will have to play to the gallery, they'll have to play to their political masters, but at a certain point, there is government policy, there is rationality, there is, I mean, if you look at what Kuria was saying, at a certain point, there is an element to even have predictability in how government is behaving. Now, if they had implemented or adopted wholesomely some of those proposals, what it would mean is that this country would technically become very, would be an environment that is extremely polluted for business, because today you start your business knowing that this is the tax regime, and then before even a year is finished, it has changed radically, and you don't know what's happening. And those are now some of the things that the professionals would go to Parliament and tell them, you can't do this.
Wakili, allow me to cut you short, because I appreciate that you've brought in the professionals, you've brought in the courts. Kenyans were alive to this time when they saw the Finance Act 2023 being passed, assented to. We saw Kyo Mutata won before it was even, assented to. We saw the back and forth in courts. We're talking about the housing levy right now. We're talking about the shift, among other things. They were in court. There are Kenyans who are watching today who are not convinced that the going to court and challenging would be any beneficiary to them. Remember, at some point, the courts had to suspend certain sections of the Finance Act 2023, even though they're already being implemented. We don't want to see the same thing with the Finance Act or Bill 2024. What different thing do we expect at this point in time between the people, the state, and the courts in this progress?
And that's why I was talking about the dichotomy.
Okay.
Because what happens in most instances when people go to court is that the court will give pronouncements that will guide future activities. And then courts have spoken about what we call in taxation, purpose and effect. And usually when we talk about all these things, when you talk about if you for example, add VAT on certain commodities, this is what it translates to. That is what the court would look at and say, what is the purpose of this and what is the effect of this? And it all goes down to what the Constitution says. And ultimately, parliamentarians now, when they want to enact a certain thing and you go to them and you tell them, remember, even if you do it, you're not for the final one. There is still the courts, and they have already interpreted this thing like this, so you are unlikely to go this way. Why don't you find another way of going about it? So then you achieve that. And all this in totality, boils down to structures that have been set out in the Constitution. Remember, something like public participation is something that is a constitutional law. Right. So that all those things ultimately affect the outcome of it. So I was basically trying to say that there is the political rhetoric, and sometimes when you listen to it, you may actually think that our parliamentarians are either dumb or something. But actually, at a certain point, they are able to reason and look at things dispassionately and say, even though our masters may want certain things to be done, even though our objective perhaps would be to use the finance bill to raise 300 billion, and we have come up with all these proposals that are aimed at that, unfortunately, we may not be able to get to that 300 billion,
All right.
and then sense then prevails, and you find that you find a middle ground in all that.
You know, I'm going to be coming back to that, and I don't know what William would say to when they jump off from whatever sock they're wearing to the other one that would be logical, and at the expense of the Kenyan. How long do Kenyans wait until they get to the sensible point is another question, but thank you, Wakili, for that. Now, let me hear from you here on the tax management. You see, if we amend this, we still have to find ways to top up. You know, we have a really big budget right now.
Yeah.
So looking at this from your lenses, what alternatives does the government have, all right, in raising the revenue they so need to ensure Kenyans are in a country that also takes care of their rights? Let's just look at the logical perspective here. If it's not going the tax way, where there are 20 or so clauses have been amended, which other alternatives are we looking at? Remember, counties are saying, some counties are saying they cannot actually, you know, raise some of their own revenue. So what are we looking at?
Okay, actually that's a very good point that you've brought about, and especially, yes, we have removed these clauses that were meant to raise the 300 billion. So if these clauses are not there anymore, so is it the loans that will come and fill in this budget that is already there? Like, this is money that is expected to go in and do some activities for this government. So we've seen actually before in previous finance acts whereby there are certain rules that are not there in the finance bill. They were not present during public participation, but when the act is signed into law, you find certain taxes, certain levies have been introduced. So one of the things we need to ask ourselves now is it a give and take? Are Kenyans going to be given the motor vehicle tax will be removed, the eco levy is being removed, VAT on bread is being removed, and then it will be replaced with some other taxes. And by the time these taxes are coming on board, it's actually too late for Kenyans to pick it. At least there's still the court laws, as Wakili has mentioned here. But then, you know, the court procedures, they are not easy, fast, not everyone. The citizens we saw today in the streets, the Gen Zs as we call them, chances are very low that such a group of people will be able to submit their issues in court to resolve matters that will be passed in the Finance Act.
Personally or through
yeah, mostly even through a legal invoice. Remember, these things need financial support. We do not know how many of them will be able to actually afford to initiate a court procession to oppose something that they find in the Finance Act. And whether they'll already have given up on these Kenyan laws, because as you said, how long shall Kenyans wait to? It's a give and take. You're given on this side, but on the other side, it's taken away. Yeah.
All right. You know, the question is, why were there arrests in the first place? Why were there arrests? What are your thoughts? Because I will give this to Wakili, but she's just raised something. She's saying they pretty much look vulnerable.
No, they are not vulnerable, by the way. Yeah? For your information, there are some very youth-focused organizations that work with these Gen Zs.
All right.
I think Siasa Place is one of them. They have an awesome program and very active program for this population. But the other thing I observed today is they are very open to partnerships and collaboration. So it's not just our thing as young people. They would be willing to work with Okia. They were willing to work with Boniface Mwangi. They are willing to work with as many people as possible who step up to the occasion and work with them. So I don't think I would term them as vulnerable or incapable of going to court. But then again, why were they arrested? I think we still have a government that operates with the colonial laws and does not appreciate that this society has metamorphosed so much. I'm not even sure if that's the right English. To the extent that, you know, a demonstration can be organized online and come and it be peaceful, and they be able to communicate eloquently and ably what they feel about the matter for which they are picketing. And so on that one, I'd love to condemn it and say that I don't think that's the right direction to go. But let me finish by one or two things.
Yes.
The people versus the court, Bwana President. You know, when she was asking you about last year, the government blatantly ignoring a court order to not implement housing levy. And these guys are just doing it. LSK was quiet and very, very silent on the matter.
Was it? Very silent. You're saying very, very silent on the matter.
Very silent on the matter.
He hadn't retired.
He was the president.
He hadn't retired.
To hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
Before that, the court pronounced itself about going to the police going to Haiti. And it was very clear. And then the AG went and somehow just, changed that ruling into he interpreted a court decision in a way that did not look like advice, but more of an interpretation. And again, I did not hear from my good president. Before that, there was the other matter of the CDF. These guys, it is just clearly wrong to have CDF, to have money being managed by Parliament. And then, so I think the courts, much as we respect their decisions, I think there are areas where I would expect the judiciary to step up to the occasion, and they failed. And even when the judges have done their part nicely, I would expect that the society would stand with the judges and support that this is the way, walk ye in it. But the society has not pulled up their weight to support the decision of the judges. And so on that one, I still think that the decision for Mwananchi to go and fight for their rights as opposed to wait for the court was still the best of the day.
Akili, we need clarity. You went silent when people needed you. Kenyans kept saying the parliament has failed them. In fact, I am intrigued by this. Occupy Parliament. You know how supreme that National Assembly is. You know how supreme the Senate is. Occupy Parliament, Wakili, just by these two words, Kenyans were truly agitated.
That is indeed true, but you see, I think William also probably is not a very good student of what has happened in the past.
Okay.
Because, the initial step to actually occupy Parliament was first moved by Law Society of Kenya under President Nelson Harvey when there was an agitation for the two-thirds principle and, the decision that Maraga had made that Parliament ought to be dissolved in terms of what the law has been. And then secondly, even on the housing levy, Law Society challenged it. The court agreed with us. It went to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal gave a stay. Eventually, the Court of Appeal, made certain, has not made a final pronouncement, but as a result of that decision, Parliament has enacted a new legislation, which is also currently in court, being challenged.
So you see this cycle?
We would have to have and wait. But all I'm saying is this, and even in the times when the former President Uhuru Kenyatta did not agree or comply with court decisions, and we must give the devil its due. President William Ruto's government, to a large extent, has actually complied with the court orders. You cannot, if you were to compare it with the previous administration, the previous administration, was more blatant.
Can I put you to task? Just 1 minute of giving us those key comparisons of what is it that, you give credit to President Ruto for that Uhuru Kenyatta was able to do. Maybe 2 or 3.
Now, for example, we as a Law Society, yes, we got an order to stop the vetting of the cabinet secretaries because they did not meet the two-thirds majority. And actually Parliament suspended that process. And that is something that, Parliament has always been, courts cannot interfere and dictate to
the CSS?
The parliamentary process.
Okay.
No. Initially, when the president set out, first nominated the CSS in
the
office,
cabinet.
the cabinet,
Okay.
we actually went to court and obtained an order that stayed that process. And Parliament actually suspended the vetting of the CSS until they went to court, and the court overturned that decision. That's when the same proceeded. So I'm saying that this administration, I mean, you have to give it credit to a large extent when it comes to compliance with court orders. There has been that compliance, and I was making this point that as a country, we are a country based on the rule of law. The young men and women who are protesting out there are protesting out there because they have a constitutional right to be out there and protest. Yeah. And that is why the Law Society was even writing a letter saying, as long as they are out there exercising that right peacefully and unarmed, and they have notified the police as required under the Public Order Act, the police cannot prescribe that movement, and that was wrong.
That was wrong.
Yes, and, okay. and that is exactly what the Law Society was saying. And that is why when you are a society that is governed by the rule of law, that then recourse to court should never be one of those things that we would say that even if we go to court, the regime will not obey. Because one thing that, that I need to make clear is this, is that our judicial system operates on what we call precedent. So sometimes you just want the court to make a ruling. Even if it is not complied with, the ruling still remains.
All right.
And 5 years, 6 years, 7 years down the line, everyone knows that when you go to court on this issue, this is what the courts are going to say.
All right.
But whether they comply or not is a different issue. And that brings me to my last point that I was making, that whatever was happening today is something that we really need to take a critical look at, because it might just be something that changes the manner in which we politic in this country. Because why would you, for example, disregard a court order? Is that because you think there'll be no consequence to it? But if the public then can come out and agitate that that order needs to be complied with, whatever the court has said needs to be done, has to be done, and then public opinion coalesces around that issue, and people now push in that direction, there'll be a radical shift in the manner in which we govern our country. If we can push accountability, because we have challenges of accountability in this country. If we can push accountability in the manner in which this has happened, then we will begin to see a shift in terms of how our politics operate. And for me, this is something that I really want to see how it's going to.
Now, Agnes, before I hear from you, thank you, Wakili, because Wakili is bringing us a very different perspective, talking about this could be a change in number one, political survival, and how we're going to be running politics here. But a Kenyan watching who is struggling to understand which are these clauses that have been amended, you know, let alone all these rumors now, looking at the power of social media, Kenyans are wondering, should we trust anymore what we're seeing on social media? Let's quickly give you these graphics of the key areas that have been amended in this bill. We're looking at the motor vehicle tax, levy, bread tax, the edible oil tax, the ones on the diapers and sanitary pads, which is still under debate, especially from a number of voices that we've seen. The motor vehicle and three-wheeled vehicle, bicycle, you saw, of course, Honorable Wamushomba speaking on some of her live videos on the same, speaking of the price of wheelbarrows, but of course you had Kimani Ichung'wah saying it is not what it looks like they can explain. Processing of data, among other things, these are the proposed tax items that the of course, the government has said, we have heard you. But let's also hear and read the statement of the Kenya Kwanza administration quickly after, of course, listening to Kenyans. And this just to give you perspective of the facts on the table, away from what you're seeing on social media. It's coming up shortly, of course, with the help of my team. You will see it as we continue to talk. And in that regard, Agnes, I will still come back to you because this is the statement by the Kenya Kwanza administration. They also came out and it's very clear now, it's all over social media. But one thing that we still need to hear, you know, Kenya Revenue Authority has a task. They have to collect what they have to collect. But even sometimes when the taxes are over there, or you know, they're high, they've still told us at some point we're not able to meet their targets. What is this class we are missing? What is the lesson that probably the experts advising the government did not take seriously in as far as your tax management expertise is concerned?
Okay, so first I'd say it's always said that overtaxing an economy does not always result to collection of much more taxes in the long run.
It's not a guarantee.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee. In fact, after some time, that economy will be so overburdened, you will collect less taxes than you used to before. So the first point would be, our government needs to come up with more effective ways of tax collection that do not focus more on overburdening a taxpayer. For example, they were just doing an analysis of a person who's paid 50,000, and they were doing some deductions and the taxes that apply on it, and they saw they're taking home 29,000. So assuming such a person in a different taxation system were taking home, let's say, even 35,000. There's a whole difference of 6,000, which in the case that may be, a person may even choose to invest in another business. For example, save up and buy a motorbike and rent it out there for more income. But in a case whereby they take home so little, the motivation is not even there. They'll just focus on basic needs and the economy continues to narrow down. If anything, maybe they might do away with some house helps in the process and less people will be employed. So even as we want to collect much more taxes, as the KRA wants to hit their targets,
yes,
it's very critical for the government to come up with measures that have been tested. And you know, in the global economy, each and every country collects its revenue through taxes and a few of grants here and there. So there's a lot to be learned from the world.
But haven't you heard some government officials saying, we're not as bad as Kenyans are putting it, we're not as bad as some of you economists are saying we are. There's some countries that are taxing people more. That narrative has come to you.
I have heard of it. Actually, I've heard that Kenyans have been made to believe that they pay too many taxes, which is a lie, according to the statement. My point is, Kenyans, it has been like the last, let me just even say 2 years. The taxes that have been introduced are so many. Can we even move slowly if we have to?
So gradually.
And as Wakili was saying here, even for an investor, it's good for me to even know where I'm headed. I don't want to start a business today in Kenya and I can't even make a 5-year strategic plan because next year and the other year there'll be so much drastic changes and this is in relation to the taxes that will be on my business, that it's so hard for me to even know to which direction I'm going. That will discourage investors from coming into the country and even local investments. If I cannot trust that I can go into the taxi business now and still be safe in the next 5 years, I'm most likely not to even get into it, probably because I'll be taking off a loan to repay in 5 years, and then things change by the 3rd and 4th year. That throws me off balance.
Off balance, we all need balance. To grow an economy, to build a family, to have children, you need balance. In fact, as we speak and we're getting to close, Kenyans should not be losing the bigger picture. This is what some political analysts are saying. Politics can be a bit cunning. So there is a bigger picture. Look, cases of data protection, these things emerged, KRA having some extra access. Do you think that has been touched on, William?
No, I don't think that has been touched on. In fact, there is an amendment that is proposed to give KRA power to now ensure that every one of us joins e-teams. I'm not sure if that has been touched by the presser that they had at State House. And so that remains to be observed and to be seen how it goes. But I want to say two things before we end this conversation. One is I want to agree with my colleagues on tax sustainability. This has also been pointed out by the US ambassador, who is like the biggest ambassador supporting this administration. And she was like, the investors are jittery with the tax situation because it's just too unpredictable. And so for me, that is an area that we must put our focus on, so that even if it means amending the law so that then we have one finance bill that runs for 5 years maybe, I think that should be considered. The second thing also that I want to say is I want to commend Kenyans. One of the beautiful things about this administration is that whether by accident or by design, they have helped the country to discuss economic matters ever so eloquently. I know Agnes was asking whether these young people really understand what they are fighting for. They do. And there was a lot of conversation online on these subjects before they came out. And so for me, that is a plus moving forward, that I can say finance bill and people actually understand what it is, that I can actually talk about budget and they actually understand what it is. And so that is appreciated. On the comments that we were sharing with the president,
as we conclude,
is just to say that, yes, I commend the LSK for the process they did. But I still think that the LSK should be able to stand with the judiciary when they make a decision and it feels like the government is not considering that decision. There are other things we can ignore, but on matters touching on Mwananchi, I think LSK still has options in terms of maandamano, mgomo, delisting some of those guys. Asante.
Wakili, as we close, you know, I'm thinking of a situation, I think in Sudan, one of these African countries, where just a matter of bread, it was a tax on bread, and I think this caused, I think, is it Bashir of Sudan, his presidency. So these young people just could be a snap. And the president, I think, did a good thing to listen. What would be your closing remarks to this matter? As much as William is consistently putting the judiciary on the spot, just as we close this discussion, Wakili.
No, that's fine. I think I like what William is saying. And the one thing is that, he probably missed this a lot, because in our time, I think we probably called about 2 or 3 protests on various issues touching on the rule of law and the administration of justice. But for me, and this is what I would want to say, and the breakout out of this, is that the most important thing besides the politics is actually the value of public participation. The comments that were made by various individuals.
This is unfair. He's bringing this one, I cannot comment.
Were they taken into consideration before the passing of the Finance Act? That is what a lot of people are going to focus on, because there are all these things that have been said will be dropped. But ultimately, because that is the purpose of Parliament, the purpose of Parliament is to make laws, to consider the various representations and to make law. That is one of the things that people will be looking at, to try and see what has actually been dropped and what is the final outcome. And I want to feel a little bit encouraged in the manner in which, the comments that have come out of the PG, they seem to suggest that they took the views of Kenyans seriously, and so we need to just wait and see how is that bill looking at, and then review it vis-a-vis the views that have been given, and make our conclusions based on the final outcome of it, because clearly either the pressure or the sense of it must have worked, because we have a lot of things.
One of those
that were dropped. Yeah.
But I want to hear from Agnes, just very quickly, if the director would allow me. You know, listening to Honorable Babu Owino, of course in a different platform, saying, well, they could play tricks on you and if you followed closely, the speaker, according to what he's saying, because you uphold the Constitution, I just want to understand, because when the electorate are either misguided by utterances, it makes us lose confidence. If the honorable member would say they were probably tricked and they were told the reading will not happen, and then they're accused of not being present, you know what absenteeism would, result to. Kenyans do not want to see such things repeating themselves. What would you tell the House, the people in leadership, the government, in as far as respecting how the parliament should behave, quorum, among other things, and as far as we're looking at this tabling now, we're looking at Thursday and Wednesday. This shenanigans of absenteeism, we were tricked, are coming in and things keep passing. Should we make arrests now in this 2024 one?
To be quite honest, I've always been someone who's very pessimistic about political utterances.
All right.
I believe that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let us wait for the final product.
Okay.
Because one other thing is this. Parliamentarians, we have elected them with a constitutional mandate to legislate, to represent, and to oversight. Yeah? And so they ought to be able to carry out that function. Right. So we can only sort of audit how effective they have been when we see the final product. But what I'm trying to say is that looking at everything, looking at the comments that have come in, looking at what the PG has said, this is the feedback and this is ultimately what we're going to present, it looks like that the majority of the views that were presented may have been taken into account, and probably the product that has now come out is an enriched product and might be a product that a lot of people are not going to have problems with.
All right. Wakili is remaining objective and telling me, Anki, keep it away from the politics, things about the country. Agnes, let me hear. Mr. Me is saying nobody can claim that we are teaching kids bad manners. He's talking about the Gen Z. Are we taking care of our children? Is there a gap? But that aside, what would be your closing remarks to this matter? We need a country that's working. You know that the lenders will be happy if we go and borrow more.
Yes. So, we mentioned that the 300 billion still needs to be met.
Yes.
In one way or another. So the question is, if it's not met because these taxes were removed, or the proposals that had been proposed were dropped, where then are we going to get the money from? Are we going to get new taxes introduced?
It doesn't have to be met. Actually, some of those things from the budget can be removed so that we edit the budget to reflect where we are.
Yeah.
Because we pay taxes to fund for the budget.
For the budget,
yes.
That's one of the solutions.
As we close.
We could reduce the spending, that is edit or format the budget to fit what we have. Number two, there's also, as Wakili has mentioned here, actually he said he's pessimistic, but for me I'll say I'm open.
He's optimistic, I think.
He's pessimistic.
Okay. About political
but for me I'm open. There could be instances where, and we wait to see in the next few days, we'll find new laws that have been introduced to cater for this new deficit that is in there.
Is that legally right, Wakili? What do we do if we?
No. I mean, it's
okay.
It's not right, and that has always been the subject of litigation. And if it happens in this time, chances are that it will be the subject of litigation
again.
And courts have interpreted that and given whatever. So we'll have to wait and see.
So Agnes, now you're telling us it happens, but Kenyans are now woke to that matter. We'll look at the Finance Bill 2024 or act for that matter. Sorry to cut you short, just as you close.
Yes, so for me, first, it's a good move for the Gen Zs. It's highly encouraged that we continue to teach ourselves and our children to be focused in the laws that are being implemented and legislated for our countries. And second, we do not stop even at the acts. We continue to go to the courts. As he has said, they are good support organizations that will hold the young people, even though financially they may not be able, or even skill-wise, they may not be so much experienced to